Hello everyone, Jambi or JJ here. Welcome to my channel. And this is the first video of the year 2022. I wish all of you guys have a great new year. And today I'm going to do what I promised earlier in my previous videos. I'm going to review this Aorus Waterforce X 280. So you might notice that previously I was using the unboxing the 360 AIO, and now I get switched to the 280. It is because I measured it doesn't fit into this Phantom's P500 case. And the performance of these two AIOs should be really similar. And the 280 AIO is actually having a surface area around like 392 centimeters squared, while the 360 AIO is having a surface area of 432, which is like 10% more than the 280 AIO. So their performance should be really similar, and it is quieter because it's only using 2 fans versus 3 fans on the 360 AIOs. So so in this video actually I'm going to talk about a lot of different things about this AIO, some do's and bads. And first of all, we should always start with the thermals. Let's talk about the thermals first. So the testing rig that I'm using right here has the case of the Phantom's P500, CPU of Ryzen 5 5600X, with a motherboard of Aorus Extreme X570, and the RAM being two 16 gigs G-Skill DDR4 36616. And for the GPU, I'm using the Aorus Waterforce X 3080 water block. And for the CPU, I'm just using this Aorus Waterforce X to test out the temperature. Now, I want to take a look at the thermal test for the 30 minutes AIDA 64 Extreme FPU test. And let's ignore the custom and 0 RPM at this moment. Let's look at the other 4 predefined modes, which is quiet, balance, performance, and max. And you might notice that all these performance under load, they are really similar. That is because all these curves that was predefined by Aorus had already set the fan speed to maximum, which is about like 2500 RPM when it reaches like 65 degrees Celsius. So let's look at the Aorus quiet mode, right? So we can see that at the 0 to 30 degrees is setting at around like 900 RPM, which is fine. But like when it starts to get to 50 degrees, the fan suddenly spin up to like 1500 RPM, and then at 65 degrees Celsius, it's already reached 2500 RPM, which is the max. So like normally speaking, the CPU can only stay under like 50 degrees Celsius when you're not doing anything. Like right now for current applications on your computer, like for Chrome, if you just open the Chrome and then take a look at some videos or browsing the internet, it's easily your CPU is getting to like 50-60 degrees Celsius, and which get the fans to really crazy around that speed. So what I want to express here is all these fan curves, whether it's quiet mode or balance mode or max and performance mode, they're basically not that useful because the fans are extremely noisy at all these curves. So what I would recommend is to actually do a custom curve by yourself, maybe setting around like 900 RPM throughout 60 degrees, and then you can gradually increase to like 1400 RPM from all the way later. So because I don't find a lot of difference if you look at the temperature under 30 minutes loads. So my custom curve is at 1400 RPM, and it only reaches to 71 degrees Celsius after 30 minutes of the FPU test, which is only like 5 to 6 degrees higher than the max performance. So there's just no point of just tuning your fan to the max performance mode, which is really loud, and nobody can bear that actually. So now let's take a look at the 0 RPM mode. So you can see this is definitely some mode that I would not recommend anyone to use this. Actually, this is actually Aorus' fault to even have this in here. A 0 RPM mode is fine. Like, if you just think about 0 RPM, it's cool. Like if you're not using anything, your CPU is not under load, it's fine. It's just to keep the fans not spinning, which is extremely quiet. But looking at Aorus curve here, so it is 0 throughout. That means that even your CPU is under stress test, it still remains 0 RPM. It's not even tuning at all. So I have actually, let the CPU actually at risk to stay at 0 RPM mode for 5 minutes under FPU test, and it reaches to actually 80 degrees Celsius. That's when I stop. I don't want to hurt my CPU while doing some FPU test. This is also very bad for some people. Like people would say like, hey, I can just keep it to 0 RPM mode, but without noticing the fan curve, and this could definitely damage your CPU. So this is pretty bad. This mode should never be tuned like this. So I would expect, maybe 0 RPM from 0 to 50 degrees, and then starts to gradually spin up some of the fans to pull the temperature down. So this is some of the mode that Aorus should never introduce to you. As I mentioned in my previous video, that one really cool feature about this Aorus Waterforce X is that you can rotate its LCD screen along the way. So you never need to worry about whether you're installing in the wrong rotation. I think most of you guys still remember when Henry Carrel was assembled his first PC with the Kraken Z73. The first time he did it, he installed it in the wrong direction, so he has to redo everything again. But for the Waterforce X, you can just install it whatever rotation you want, and then just rotate it when you actually having it installed. So this is pretty cool. I really like this feature. Okay, so now let's have already talked about the thermals and the rotatable screen of this AIO. Let's talk about other good things while using this AIO. The first thing is being that the pump noise is actually okay. So I turned the pump noise to the max all the time. You know what, I don't hear it often. So compared to the Regine 2 360 AIO that I have on my other rig, I can hear like the tick-tock sound all the time. So, from time to time, not all the time. So I think in terms of pump noises, this is fine. But I do mention earlier that they have a firmware update that is going to increase the pump maximum pump from 2800 all the way to 3200. I don't know if that's going to bring up the noise, but I think it's safe to say that you can set up the pump at the maximum speed because it's really, you don't hear a lot from it. And the second thing is the fancy LCD screen. So as you can see from the from the screen that behind me, there's like different modes that you can choose from this. There's like several enthusiastic mode. There's like you can upload custom GIFs, videos, and you can also even choose like rotatable mode, which is switch between different kinds of modes that you can choose, which is really good. So for some people who really wants to put some interesting thing in here, feel free to do that. So this is a really nice fancy screen. I think it's actually one of the best screens that I've ever used. It has even more selections compared to the Regine 2 360. So yeah, I think this is pretty cool for people who really values it. And the third thing I would say is like it has pretty good thermal capacity. So the enlarged tubing is able to keep the temperature well within range. And the next thing I will talk about is actually it's compatible with the LG 1700. So as you might notice that most of the AIOs on the market right now doesn't have this compatibility. You have to order like special mounting kit for that, which is have to wait for like 1 or 2 months. But for this one, it is including the LG 1700 mounting hardware right outside the box, which is adding some points to it. And the next thing is that it's, when I mentioned this in my unboxing part, which is it has thermal paste included in the box. It has way more thermal paste included that you should have in the box. So which I think that is good. I haven't measured the thermal performance of that thermal paste, but being able to have that and giving you ability to switch out AIOs from time to time and not, not like other AIOs. So if you use up the stock, you have to buy extra. So that is pretty good for them. And the final thing I want to mention about the good thing about this AIO is it has the chaining of the PMW fans together, so you don't have to prepare 3 of the PMW headers on your motherboard in order to get them together to control the fans. So that's all the good things that I can think about of this AIO, but on the other hand, there's also something bad about it. Let's talk about something bad about this AIO. So first of all, this AIO has way too many wires that I think, although I said that it's daisy chain. Think of the two fans. The two fans you already have two PNW wires, you have two ARGB connectors, which you also have two wires coming out from your AIO, which is connecting the fans and the RGBs. And you also have to have one SATA power wire coming out from your pump just to power your pump, and you also have a USB header from your LCD screen all the way to the motherboard. So I feel like there's a lot of extra wires. If you have some person that really wants to have your front of the case look as good as the back of your case, you definitely don't want too many wires in your system. So this might not be the AIO for you. And the second thing is the tube size. It might be a little bit too short for some of the cases if you want to mount it onto the front side of your case. It's okay to mount at the top of the side of your case in any case scenario. As I mentioned in my previous videos, the tube length is like 40 centimeters for the Kraken Z73. This one's a little bit shorter. I think it would be like anywhere from 30 to 35 centimeters. So it's already like 5 centimeters short than the Kraken Z73. So I doubt in some cases that you will be able to mount into the front of your case. So be really careful and cautious when you try to mount it in the front of your case. If there's to avoid any length limit. And the next thing I want to talk about is the price. The price, this AIO is actually quite pricey. So on Amazon right now, for the 280, we're looking at 360 in Canadian dollars. And I think for the 360 ones, you're looking at 389, which is exactly the same price as the Kraken Z73. So the Kraken Z73 has a lot of the same features as this one, and I think in cooling, in the thermal parts, it's always the AIO is hardest one to beat, except for the Arctic ones, which has been revealed by the Gamers Nexus that it is the top AIO. But for this one, it's for the same price. I think Kraken Z73 is a better choice. And the other thing is the quality control of the hardware, the software. It is definitely a nightmare. So for anyone who has ever been using the Aorus entire ecosystem, you have to install two things on your system. One thing is Aorus engine that's controlling the pump speed and also the fan speed and the fan curve, and also some if you have Aorus GPU, you can control it with the some overclocking settings on your Aorus GPU. And the second you have to install is the RGB Fusion 2.0, which controls the specific RGB stuff on your machine. So these two softwares actually looks extremely suspicious and is really laggy when you try to use it. And sometimes it just doesn't recognize some of the specific hardware on your system, except for example like RAM. So sometimes I open RGB 2.0, it can detect my RAM, and sometimes it doesn't even see the RAM in there. So I think Aorus really needs to work on the entire ecosystem of the software. And on that note, I think that ASUS is doing really well with this Armor Crate. Although some people also reported it's really hard to control everything with Armor Crate, but compared to Aorus, it's already an improvement. So I think Aorus really needs to work on their software, stuff. And also, you even see some, like typos on their software. Like for this should be like team up and fight on, right? But now it shows that temp up and fight on, which is ridiculous. So they really need to double check their work before they post their software and making it to the customer, because it will make the software looks really, really suspicious. And the next thing that I want to mention about is the easiness to install its newest firmware. For that, from their website, if you're looking at the instructions on how to update firmware, you will need a specific SSD, which is not included in the box, and insert it into your AIO and do the update. I already ordered a micro SD on the way. But the fact that you have to use the micro SD to update the AIO is kind of ridiculous. And it also has to be less than 32 gigs and be formatted to a specific format. I think these things were actually really, really cheap on the internet. It's like, if you buy this from Amazon, it's like $10. And if you like a big company like Aorus, if you order this micro SDs directly from the factory, I think it's going to be much cheaper than the customers getting it. So why not just include it inside the AIO so that we don't have to buy all these things? This feels like really a prehistoric thing that you shouldn't appear into a flagship product like this. So yeah, so these are the pros and cons that I'm thinking using this AIO. So if you really like this video, hit that like button and then subscribe to my channel. And if you have more questions about this AIO and you want me to show in the next video or some Q&A sessions, feel free to post in the comment section. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye bye.